David, in your presentation, you mentioned affective forecasting. Can you explain for those listening here what that is?
So affective forecasting is like weather forecasting. You look out your window, looks like rain, or it's going to be a sunny day. And then there are professionals who look at weather forecasts and they predict, a day out, a week out, track of a storm and so forth. Well, we can do the same with emotions, but it takes expertise. And affective forecasting is a great skill to work on, which means how could this conversation go? Somebody in my congregation is asked to speak to me, a teenager who I know. Can I forecast or predict how this conversation may go? What if he starts with this topic or she starts with this topic? If I reply in a certain way, what are some possible reactions? So it's actually looking at alternative scenarios and being prepared. If I know that it's possible that this conversation could go one way, I'll be more prepared to do that. I'll have emotion management strategies. I'll just be ready for different things, as opposed to being caught off guard, not knowing what might happen. And look, maybe this is much ado about nothing. Maybe I worried myself too much, but I think it's more important when you deal with youth and teens and so forth to be over prepared. Because if it goes wrong, it goes wrong, and it's really hard to pull it back. So, again, a child who's feeling frustrated, if I don't address the frustration, what's the next stop on that emotion train? Well, anger. And if I fail to address the anger, what's that next stop? Rage. So it also allows us to maybe intervene sooner rather than later in that affective chain of events. So, and this is really hard. I don't know how you would do it, but it's almost triaging things as well, which is somebody in my ministry who's merely frustrated. Can I just put that aside? Because that doesn't seem all that important. But if you wait a day or a week, has that grown and has that become anger? And now there's a really big issue. Mm-hmm. And I think this must happen a lot, which is, do we second guess ourselves and realize I didn't return the call? I should have returned the call sooner. I didn't see it going this way. I don't know how you handle that, right? Because if you jumped on every single feel that you had about this, you wouldn't get any sleep at all. But this is an important ability, right? Which is, it doesn't seem that critical now compared to everything else on my plate, but I could predict how it might change. I think that's a really important skill. It will prevent. It's a preventative skill. Yeah. Let's intervene before it gets really, really bad. Yep. But hard to do.